Oh, hello. Well, we have a special Mother's Day edition of Weekly Lit. I'm Sean Ryan, your host, and the tonight's selection I'm going to dedicate to my mom, Lorraine Ryan, because she probably did more than anybody to teach me to read, to take me to the library and the bookmobile, and she raised a family of readers. I mean, both my parents are avid readers, but we're focusing on Mother's Day. And she also taught me to appreciate a good cigar. And so for those, actually, that was my dad. I misspoke. My dad did the cigars, but Mom took us weekly or more to the bookmobile or the local library as children. And there's really three things that you should do for a child, and my folks did all of them. Get a library card, get a YMCA membership or the equivalent, and go to church each week. And continue with all those things to this day. Not exactly the YMCA, but a gym. And so, address all three aspects. So this is for my mom. And I am now going to utter the most chilling words, among the most chilling words that you can hear, which are, I'm going to read a couple of poems. But fear not, they're not my poems. They're poems by actual great poets. And we're varying things up a little bit this week. So I'm going to begin with High Flight by John Gillespie Magee from 1941. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things you have not dreamed of. Wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence, hovering there. I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up the long, delirious burning blue, I've topped the windswept heights with easy grace, where never lark or ever eagle flew. And while with silent lifting mind, I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. That poem was well celebrated, but especially poignantly read by President Ronald Reagan over my shoulder in 1986 following the Challenger disaster. And it's a wonderful poem, fairly well known. And over the course of this, it's a sonnet, 14 lines. Over the course of it, John Mcgee leaves, as he says in the first line, the surly bonds of earth and goes upward. And it's really a romantic poem in the sense that it could only have been written, it was written in 1941. Obviously, it could only have been written after the Wright brothers in 1903 created or invented an operating motorized aircraft. I guess the enabling somebody to undertake the experience and then communicate it through these wonderful words. And so it moves from the earth and sort of the classic earthly bonds and the very human side of things to the phenomenal and supernatural aspect of flying above even where larks or eagles have flown, and as he says, touching the face of God. So he gets into even the supernatural and the phenomenal. He wrote it in 1941 at age 19. So by age 19, he was already flying planes and writing this level of poem, which is significant, and died soon after in a mid-air crash during training. He was with the Canadian Royal Air Force, and during training died in a mid-air crash, but left this poem. So again, it's I think fairly popular and well known. but I thought it was a good starting point for looking at poetry. And just to take a little bit of a break, we do have an email account set up, weeklylit@gmail.com, so you can send questions, recommendations, comments, mockery. I can take it. And if you have any questions, or perhaps if you would like a recommendation about a book, tell me what you like. And sometimes people say, what should I read, or what would be a good book? And tell me kind of what you like, and even if you don't tell me, I'll have some suggestions. But or if you have recommendations for me, I'm always welcoming that. So that's weeklylit@gmail.com, and then just as a bit of a preview for next week, if you want to read ahead, I'm going to cover The Secret History by Donna Tartt. We referred to her during the talk about true grit as being a person who has studied it, wrote an afterword in one of the later editions of the book, and then narrated a great audiobook. And there's another, actually, going back to the point about the libraries and visiting the libraries, I use Audible for audiobooks, for when I'm driving, but there's also Hoopla, which I use through the local library, and you get ebooks and audiobooks through the library on a borrowing basis. So use those resources. But anyway, so she did a great job narrating True Grit, and Secret History will be what we look at next week. So changing up a little bit, especially given that we're talking about Mother's Day, we're doing a harsh reversal and going with The Stolen Child by William Butler Yeats, written in, I believe, 1886 and published in 1889. But this is The Stolen Child by William Butler Yeats. Where dips the rocky highland of Sleuthwood in the lake, there lies a leafy island where flapping herons wake. The drowsy water rats, there we've hid our fairy vats, full of berries and of reddest stolen cherries. Come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Where the wave of moonlight glosses the dim gray sands with light, far off by furthest Rosses we foot it all the night. Weaving olden dances, mingling hands and mingling glances till the moon has taken flight. To and fro we leap and chase the frothy bubbles, while the world is full of troubles and anxious in its sleep. Come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Where the wandering water gushes from the hills above Glencar, in pools among the rushes that scarce could bathe a star, we seek for slumbering trout, and whispering in their ears, give them unquiet dreams, leaning softly out from ferns that drop their tears over the young streams. Come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Away with us he's going, the solemn-eyed. He'll hear no more the lowing of the calves on the warm hillside, or the kettle on the hob sing peace into his breast, or see the brown mice bob round and round the oatmeal chest. For he comes, the human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than he can understand. So that is one of Yeats' earlier poems. He's Irish, of course, and it's haunting, also obviously romantic in nature, dealing with fairies and mythology, and ostensibly the theft of a child being called into the wilderness by the fairy folk. And so there's something, again, phenomenal and also earthy about that. And you know, at the time, late 19th century, modernization is going on, the Industrial Revolution, and yet Yates is hearkening back to the timeless, the mythological, and creating you know, quite a haunting verse. And so it's just a wonderful romantic poem that I enjoy. And there's a nice version of it by in musical form by the Waterboys on their I think 87 or 88 LP, Fisherman's Blues, which is a great record in and of itself. But they have a version of this sung with a narrator reciting the poem during at least the choruses. And so you might want to check that out. So anyway, I appreciate your indulgence for letting me read some poems, and take a look at The Secret History. It's one of those, you know, everything we read on here is good or great and worth delving into. The Secret History by Donna Tartt is one of those books where you just want to tell people you should read it. You really should read it. And so we'll be discussing it next week. And until then, thank you for your time.